Hello, Abnormal Family. I sure hope everybody out there is doing great. I'm doing really, really good. Excited about some things, but I hope everybody else is doing really, really good. Good to see you guys. Good to share these encounters with you guys. If you don't mind, guys, smash the like button and share these out on your social media. Let's keep this channel growing. We're growing a lot right now, and let's keep this trend going. Let's keep it running. Alright guys, I've got an encounter for you today. I hope you all enjoy this one, and hope you're having a great Sunday with your family. When I was young, I lived with my grandmother who adopted me. We lived in this old school building that had been converted into a huge apartment complex. Now, even with me being so young, I remember random things about this place. Like how there was a Coke machine right outside our apartment door that sold my favorite soda, vanilla Coke. Or how the husband and wife that lived in the apartment next to ours always argued. They even would end up in the hallway at times throwing glass plates and glass cups at each other. I genuinely don't understand how they will ever be able to make it living in a situation like that. I remember how musty the entire building seemed to smell. But the one thing I remember most of all was that the people that lived in our ceiling. Let me start by saying that between each floor of the apartments there was a small gaps between the ceiling of the apartment and the floor of the apartment above. I'm not entirely sure why they were made that way, but I digress. I am not a carpenter, nor do I have the knowledge of the construction crews or such. Most people in the apartments would remove the ceiling panels and store small things up there. I vividly remember my grandmother storing blankets and other light things up there to get them out of the way. I never thought anything of it in my little tiny child brain, mostly because it seemed normal enough. One day my grandmother was in the kitchen cooking lunch for the two of us, and I was sitting on the futon in the living room, watching something on this old TV. When I say old, I mean old. The thing was heavy, bulky, and the outside of it was made of wood. Anyways, as I sat there watching something stupid, probably like Dora the Explorer or something along those lines, I kept hearing what sounded like humming. Now, another thing you should know about these apartments is that the walls were so thin that you could practically hear the conversation of neighbors all the time. So, I was very used to hearing mumbling and such, but this particularly, I was drawn to the ceiling tile that my grandmother used when assessing the storage in the ceiling. I walked across the room and stood directly under the ceiling tile, just staring up at it. It was weird. I remember feeling like I couldn't move. And then I saw the ceiling tile lift. Just as that happened, my grandmother walked into the living room carrying our lunch on trays, and it was like it knocked me out of this trance I was in, just staring at the ceiling. A few days went by, and once again I heard what sounded like humming or mumbling coming from the ceiling. My grandmother was sitting beside me watching I Love Lucy, and when I started staring at the ceiling, she noticed. "Honey, what are you looking at?" my grandmother asked, and I once again made my way across the living room, fixated on the ceiling tile. "I hear someone in the ceiling," I said. I was acting nonchalantly, standing directly under the ceiling tile again. My grandmother, obviously worried, pulled her little ladder over and climbed up, pushed the tile back, and went up there. Only her ribs, or down, were showing. "Baby girl, I don't see anything up here," came my grandmother's muffled voice before she climbed back down, looking at me with this worried look. And so it began. For the next 2 weeks or so, I'd hear voices or see the tile move, and grandmother was always out of the room doing whatever. And she'd come back to find me just staring up at the ceiling. Until one day, my grandmother and I were sitting on the couch watching TV when both of us heard the tile move. Both of our eyes shot up to the ceiling as the tile moved. My grandmother, being the very brave and absolutely stubborn woman that she was, went rushing over to the ladder and went climbing up, pushing the tile out of the way. "I don't know who the hell you are, but you need to get out of our house," she yelled as she ascended the ladder. only to come back down the ladder a few minutes later, looking puzzled. "There's no one up there," she said, to me with a puzzled look. She goes to the kitchen and calls my dad, and as she is explaining everything to my dad and talking to him about the ceiling in the apartment so he could do a double check, I sat on the couch, staring at the ceiling. I watched as the ceiling tile slowly but surely started to move, to where there was a tiny crack, making the space between floors visible. That's when I let out a blood-curdling scream. In that crack were two eyes that were just staring at me. My grandmother come rushing into the living room, and she let out a gasp when she too sees the two eyes staring at us from the ceiling. She yells at my dad, and we were all leaving. We were getting out of there, as she grabbed my arm and yanked me, and I was sobbing heartily. We left. And we didn't go back, not for a few days anyways. We stayed at my dad's house until him and my uncle went to investigate themselves, only to come up with empty hands, saying that the single thing that was up there was only Grandma's stored stuff. Finally, my grandmother was brave enough to go back to the apartment, and I remember us coming through the door, and my grandmother went rushing to the bathroom, while I was very slowly and cautiously walking into the living room. What I came across still gives me goosebumps to this day. On the side of that wooden TV was a skull and crossbones carved into it. Underneath, carved into the TV, were the very small but sloppy letters that spelled out the word "leave." And we did. Once my grandmother saw that, she went rushing around packing our bags, and we left. My dad and uncle did another sweep of the apartment, trying to find out what was in the ceiling as they picked up the remainder of our things. And they once again came up empty-handed. The building was later rumored to be haunted. And that being said, I do have another story I will share with you later, Mike. But what do you think this was? Do you believe it was somebody, or do you believe it was a ghost? That's a hard one to answer. I would say that almost sounds like somebody was living in your attic. I don't know about being a ghost, but definitely something weird was going on in the attic above you. But I would guess people. What do you all think was living in their attic? Do you think somebody was living up there rent-free, coming down during the night, maybe? I'm not sure. I've heard of this happening even in, like, Tulsa, a city that's not too far from here. So I'm not real sure what happened, but y'all let me know what you think in the comments. Was this something supernatural, or was this something that you believe was somebody? And as always, guys, I messed up and put this one on Abnormal Investigations. This one should have went on Seeking the Truth. I apologize for that. I run 3 channels, so sometimes I get a little confused. But I am going to be dropping another one on Abnormal Investigations. So thank you for following both channels. And remember, this is a channel where we put the off-the-rail encounters. So if you enjoy these, make sure to subscribe. And always check to make sure you're still subscribed, because sometimes people get unsubscribed that don't even unsubscribe. So thank you very much.